On Earth's deepest seafloor, there are lakes no living thing can cross. Liquid traps where a single drop spells instant death. Scientists call them brine pools, hyper-saline, oxygen-starved lakes laced with hydrogen sulfide and methane that form false bottoms within the ocean itself. Here, salinity can soar past 300 parts per thousand, nearly 10 times normal seawater, and the line between life and extinction is measured in centimeters. These lakes destroy nearly everything, yet hold secrets that could rewrite our understanding of survival, planetary evolution, and even the search for alien life. But what real forces sculpt these lakes of death, and who dares measure what lies within their chemical abyss? A conductivity temperature depth profile called CTD from the Gulf of Mexico reveals a boundary that defies ordinary ocean chemistry. The cast identification, CTD, EX1704L203, records a vertical descent through ordinary seawater until, at 1,025 meters, the probe enters the brine interface. Salinity, stable at 35 parts per thousand in the overlying water, spikes in less than a meter to over 300. The sensor's digital readout struggles to keep pace. Oxygen, once measurable in micromoles per kilogram, vanishes to undetectable levels within centimeters. Hydrogen sulfide, absent above, surges past 2,000 micromoles per liter, enough to kill most marine life instantly. Methane, too, leaps from background traces to concentrations so high the gas sometimes bubbles visibly at the interface. These numbers are not abstractions. They define the boundary between habitability and lethal exclusion. Dr. Jeffrey Seawald, marine geochemist at Woods Hole, describes the analytical challenge. Standard sensors require recalibration with every cast, and sample bottles retrieved from the brine often corrode or jam, their seals eaten away by the salt. In this chemical matrix, error margins widen, and every measurement is a battle against contamination and instrument drift. Yet the raw data remains unambiguous. The interface forms a wall, sharp, physical, and absolute, where the chemistry of life is replaced by a chemistry of preservation and decay. At the boundary, the CTD's temperature probe records subtle shifts. Brine pools in the Gulf hover near 7 degrees Celsius, while Red Sea brines can exceed 60 degrees Celsius. But it is the combined effect, salinity, oxygen, hydrogen sulfide, and methane that creates a lethal cocktail. Anything crossing the threshold is immobilized, its cellular machinery overwhelmed by osmotic shock, anoxia, and chemical toxicity. The numbers on the profile are a map of danger, each spike and plunge a warning written in data. For the teams who risk their instruments, and sometimes their remotely operated vehicles, these metrics are more than scientific curiosity. They are the only guide to navigating the invisible lakes of death that lie hidden on the ocean floor. The illusion of a solid floor dissolves at the brine pool's edge. Here, the halocline forms a barrier so sharp that it bends light, creating a shimmering mirage, a liquid boundary where water meets denser water. This interface can be only a few centimeters thick, yet it is as real as any glass wall. Objects that drift downward, whether silt, plankton, or the tip of a robotic probe, hesitate at the threshold. Some particles, caught in the gradient, float for hours or days, trapped by the abrupt density change. Others slip through, vanishing into the brine below as if falling through a hidden trapdoor. The physics behind this phenomenon are simple but unyielding. Normal seawater, with a salinity of about 35 parts per thousand, rests above brine that exceeds 300 parts per thousand. The difference in density is so extreme that the two fluids refuse to mix, even under the relentless pressure of the deep. The interface itself is not just a line, but a dynamic, ever-shifting membrane. A region where temperature, salinity, and chemical composition change more in a few centimeters than they do in hundreds of meters above. As a probe descends, CTD sensors pass from clear seawater into a swirling fog of refracted light. The digital readouts spike or flatline. Even the best-designed bottles and syringes risk contamination at the boundary, their contents mixing unpredictably with the brine. Researchers have documented gradients as thin as 1 centimeter, but in some pools, the halocline can stretch for a meter or more, forming a slow-motion cascade where layers slide past each other without blending. The effect is mesmerizing. ROV cameras capture the surface of the brine as a mirror, reflecting the lights of the submersible and the silhouettes of passing creatures. The boundary undulates, rippling with the faintest current. At times, it appears to swallow objects whole, erasing them from view. This false bottom is not a trick of the eye, but a physical reality, one that traps particles, confounds instruments, and warns explorers that the rules of the open ocean no longer apply. Beneath the Gulf of Mexico, the seafloor is anything but stable. Ancient beds of halite, rock salt, lie buried under layers of sediment, remnants of vanished seas that dried up more than 150 million years ago. Over time, the immense weight of overlying mud and sand squeezes these salt beds, forcing them to flow like slow-motion glaciers. Salt, unlike most rocks, behaves plastically under pressure. It rises in bulbous columns known as diapirs, distorting the layers above and fracturing the seafloor. These fractures become pathways. Seawater seeps down into the earth, dissolving the salt as it goes. The resulting brine, now saturated with dissolved halite, becomes denser than the surrounding water. Unable to mix, it is driven upward by the same tectonic forces that shape the diapirs, traveling through networks of cracks and faults until it spills out onto the ocean floor. The Gulf's brine pools owe their existence to this interplay of geology and chemistry. Each pool is fed by an invisible plumbing system, a labyrinth where salt and water meet under crushing pressure. The process is relentless. As long as tectonic movement continues and salt remains to be dissolved, brine will rise from the deep. This is why the Gulf of Mexico, with its restless salt domes and fractured seabed, hosts so many of these underwater lakes. The connection is direct. Without the slow, steady upwelling of salt through faults and fractures, there would be no brine pools, no lethal boundaries, just the unbroken continuity of the open sea. Long before the present-day ocean filled the Red Sea basin, cycles of evaporation left behind thick layers of salt evaporites, trapped beneath younger sediment. These ancient deposits, some sealed off for tens of millions of years, hold a chemical record of vanished seas. Over geological time, shifting tectonic plates and the movement of the African and Arabian land masses fractured the crust and allowed buried salt to migrate upward. The process is slow but relentless. Salt, under the pressure of overlying rock, flows plastically, squeezing through faults and fractures until it reaches the seafloor. When seawater seeps down and dissolves these buried salts, the resulting brine, now saturated with minerals, finds its way back up through the same pathways. In the deepest basins of the Red Sea, this remobilized brine accumulates in isolated depressions, forming hyper-saline lakes that are chemically distinct from the surrounding ocean. Each pool is a living archive, a remnant of ancient climates and vanished shorelines, preserved in liquid form. Geologists studying core samples from these sites find clear stratigraphy, layers of evaporite capped by mud, pierced by brine-filled fractures. The brine's age and mineral signature reveal its origin story, linking today's deep-sea lakes to epochs when the region was cut off from the open ocean and evaporation outpaced inflow. These reawakened salts, stirred from their ancient slumber, create some of the most extreme environments on Earth. In polar waters, a different process drives the creation of underwater brine. As sea ice forms each winter, salt is forced out of the growing crystals, a phenomenon known as brine rejection. The expelled salt does not vanish. Instead, it gathers in pockets and channels within the ice, then drains downward, increasing the salinity of the water just beneath the surface. Over time, this dense, salty water sinks, sliding along the continental shelf until it finds low points on the seafloor. There, it can collect in depressions, forming brine pools that are just as deadly as those born from ancient salt beds. This cryogenic mechanism is most pronounced in the Southern Ocean, where the cycle of freezing and melting is relentless. During the coldest months, brine-enriched water can reach salinities far above the surrounding sea, carrying with it a chill that approaches the freezing point of seawater. The descent of this brine is not a slow seep, but a cascading flow. It moves in cold, heavy streams that hug the bottom. These flows shape the chemistry of the Antarctic shelf, setting the stage for pools where life is possible only at the very edge. Unlike the Gulf or the Red Sea, the polar origin of these brine pools ties them directly to the rhythms of ice and season. Each winter, the engine restarts. Ice grows, salt is expelled, and brine plunges into the depths, reinforcing the hidden lakes that few have ever seen. The result is a cycle of formation that is simple and relentless, and that hides some of the ocean's most lethal places. The first hard evidence of deep-sea brine pools came not from chance encounters, but from deliberate mapping campaigns in the Gulf of Mexico. In the late 1980s, Dr. Charles Paul and his team deployed multi-beam sonar across the continental slope, searching for acoustic anomalies. What appeared on the screens were depressions that reflected sound differently from surrounding sediments, features that could not be explained by ordinary mud or rock. These depressions, later confirmed by direct sampling, held liquids far denser than seawater. The brine itself was invisible to sonar, but the sharp boundary at its surface created a distinct acoustic shadow, unmistakable to trained eyes. When remotely operated vehicles finally descended into these mapped basins, the reality was more unsettling than the data suggested. Remotely operated vehicle cameras captured the edges of the brine pools as perfectly still, mirror-like surfaces ringed with the remains of crabs and fish. Some carcasses appeared almost mummified, their shells and exoskeletons coated in white mineral crusts, primarily barium sulfate, precipitated from the brine's chemical soup. These preserved bodies lingered for years, sometimes decades, undisturbed by scavengers or decay. The brine's chemistry, hostile to most life, acted as a natural embalming fluid. Dr. Samantha Joy, a marine biogeochemist, recalls the first time her team sampled the brine directly. Standard water samplers jammed or corroded within minutes, their metal springs eaten away by salt and sulfide. The brine's salinity exceeded 300 parts per thousand, nearly 10 times that of the overlying water. Oxygen, once present just centimeters above, dropped to zero. Hydrogen sulfide and methane surged to levels that would be instantly fatal to most marine animals. Instruments designed for open ocean research struggled to function in these extremes, but the data they returned was unambiguous. These pools were chemically distinct, physically isolated, and lethal to intruders. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration vessel Okeanos Explorer logged the first full acoustic profile of a Gulf brine pool in 2014, confirming the depression's structure and the sharpness of its boundary. The pool's edge, mapped in unprecedented detail, revealed a rim lined with tube worms and mussels, organisms that survive only through partnership with chemosynthetic microbes. Beyond this narrow band, life simply ended. The brine's surface, smooth and reflective, formed a visible line between habitability and exclusion. For scientists like Paul and Joy, these pools prove not only the reality of underwater lakes of death, but also the power of deep-sea mapping to reveal hidden worlds. Deep within the Red Sea, the chemistry of brine pools takes on a palette unlike any other on Earth. Here, the water is not just saltier, it is hotter, denser, and steeped in metals that rarely appear in such concentrations outside volcanic vents. In the Atlantis too deep, temperatures soar above 60 degrees Celsius, and the brine is laced with iron, manganese, copper, and zinc. This metal-rich abyss is a product of ancient evaporites, dissolved and remobilized by tectonic rifting. The result is a hyper-saline lake with a chemical fingerprint all its own. For microbiologists like Dr. Andreas Teskey, the Red Sea brine pools are a living laboratory. Each basin harbors a different world, defined by gradients of temperature and minerals. Teskey's team, working alongside Schmidt Ocean Institute expeditions, has catalogued a staggering diversity of microbes thriving at the brine's edge. Many of these organisms are unknown elsewhere, some with genes tuned for extreme heat, others for surviving in toxic, metal-laden water. Sulfur dominates the metabolic landscape. In the darkness, where sunlight never penetrates, sulfur-oxidizing bacteria form dense mats along the brine interface. These microbes do not simply tolerate the chemical extremes, they exploit them. By metabolizing hydrogen sulfide and elemental sulfur, they generate energy in a process that echoes the earliest forms of life on Earth. Genomic sequencing reveals entire families of bacteria and archaea equipped with novel enzymes, capable of transforming sulfur and metals in ways never observed in surface waters. The Red Sea's brine pools are not silent wastelands. Instead, they are zones of relentless chemical exchange where every molecule of hydrogen sulfide, every trace of dissolved metal, becomes fuel for microbial innovation. The boundaries are sharp, but life crowds the margins. Mussels and tube worms, absent from the brine itself, cluster at the interface, relying on their microbial partners to convert chemical gradients into sustenance. Each pool, isolated by geology and chemistry, becomes an evolutionary crucible, a test of what life can become when pushed to the edge. For Tesk and his colleagues, every sample pulled from these depths is a message from a world where biology and chemistry are inseparable and where the limits of survival are redrawn with every discovery. On the Antarctic continental margin, the rules of the ocean bend to the cold. Here, the engine behind brine formation is winter itself. As sea ice thickens, it locks away fresh water and rejects salt, creating pockets of dense, hyper-saline water that begin to sink. These flows, known as cryobrines, cascade along the seafloor, seeking out depressions where they pool in the dark. Unlike the Gulf of Mexico or the Red Sea, where tectonics and ancient evaporites write the story, the Antarctic process is driven by the relentless cycle of freezing and melting. Each winter, the shelf is flooded with new pulses of brine, cold and saturated, sliding beneath the ice and shaping the chemistry of the deep. Dr. Hugh Griffiths, a marine biogeographer at the British Antarctic Survey, warns that these margins remain among the least explored on Earth. The Southern Ocean covers more than 20 million square kilometers, yet systematic mapping of its deep basins is just beginning. Most brine accumulations here are inferred from indirect evidence, anomalous salinity measurements, subtle shifts in bottom water chemistry, and rare CTD casts that hint at hidden lakes beneath the ice. The few direct samples retrieved from shelf depressions show salinities well above 50 parts per thousand, with temperatures hovering near the freezing point. In some cases, methane concentrations are elevated, suggesting a link to deeper processes like hydrate dissociation. The influence of Antarctic brines extends far beyond their hidden pools. As these dense flows descend, they help drive the formation of Antarctic bottom water, the cold, salty current that sinks and spreads northward, influencing global ocean circulation. Each pulse of cryobrine carries with it a fingerprint of the polar environment, imprinting the chemistry of the deep sea. Yet for all their importance, the full extent and character of Antarctic brine pools remain a mystery. The seafloor here is a frontier, mapped in fragments, where each new survey raises more questions than it answers. Griffiths reflects on the scale of the unknown, vast regions where no ROV has descended, no CTD has sampled, and no camera has captured the edge of a polar brine lake. In these waters, the boundary between knowledge and speculation is as sharp as the halocline itself. The Antarctic margin stands as a reminder that, even in the age of satellites and global surveys, the ocean still holds secrets, some hidden beneath ice, others locked in pools of salt and silence. At the rim of a brine pool, life persists not through brute resistance, but through partnership. Tube worms and mussels cluster along the boundary, never venturing into the brine itself. Their survival hinges on a hidden alliance, an internal power plant fueled by chemosynthetic microbes. Inside the tissues of these animals, dense aggregations of bacteria transform lethal chemicals into nourishment. For tube worms, the key organ is the trophosome, a spongy mass that replaces a digestive tract. Here, billions of sulfur-oxidizing bacteria convert hydrogen sulfide, diffusing upward from the brine, into usable energy. The process resembles photosynthesis, but instead of light, these microbes harness chemical gradients. They oxidize hydrogen sulfide to sulfate, releasing energy that is shared with their animal host. Mussels take a different route, but rely on the same principle. Their gill tissues are packed with symbiotic bacteria. Some specialize in oxidizing hydrogen sulfide, others in methane. The mussels filter water at the brine margin, drawing in these dissolved gases. The bacteria metabolize them, generating organic carbon that sustains both partners. This arrangement allows mussels to thrive where food from above is scarce and sunlight never reaches. In both cases, the animal provides a stable home and steady supply of reactants. The microbes supply energy and in return receive protection from the harshest extremes. Dr. Robert Vrijenhoek, a pioneer in the study of deep-sea symbiosis, describes these partnerships as evolutionary engineering. The animals do not simply tolerate the chemical edge, they exploit it. By housing chemosynthetic bacteria, they tap directly into the energy locked within the brine's toxic mix. This strategy creates a narrow but rich band of life along the pool's edge, a place where biology and geochemistry are inseparable. The boundaries are precise. Step too far into the brine, and the chemistry overwhelms even the most specialized symbiont. But at the interface, the flow of hydrogen sulfide and methane becomes the currency of survival. The result is a community shaped by gradients. Tube worms and mussels form dense colonies, their tissues pulsing with microbial activity. The energy they harvest supports not only themselves, but also a web of smaller creatures, shrimp, crabs, and polychaetes that graze on the margins. Each organism occupies a niche defined by its tolerance for sulfide and methane, and by the efficiency of its microbial partners. In these narrow bands, the rules of the surface ocean no longer apply. Here, life is engineered from chemistry, and survival depends on the invisible work of microbes deep within the tissues of their hosts. At the razor-thin boundary where brine meets seawater, life organizes itself in layers, each adapted to the sharpest of gradients. Microbial mats form the first line at the interface. Their colors range from milky white to sulfur yellow, sometimes tinted orange or deep red, depending on which chemical reactions dominate. These mats are not passive coatings. They trap nutrients drifting down from above, capturing organic particles and dissolved gases before they can escape into the brine below. Sulfur-oxidizing bacteria cluster in the uppermost layer, using hydrogen sulfide, diffusing upward from the brine as fuel. Just millimeters beneath, other microbes specialize in methane oxidation, feeding on gas that seeps through the interface in invisible plumes. The mats themselves become magnets for opportunists. Polychaetae worms and amphipods graze across the surface, scraping up bacterial biomass. Some shrimp and small crabs patrol the edge, exploiting the chemical bounty but never venturing far from the safety of normal seawater. Predators time their approach with precision. In the Gulf of Mexico, hagfish and eelpouts lurk just outside the toxic zone, waiting for weakened or dying fish to drift close to the brine's edge. When a carcass or stunned animal crosses the threshold, scavengers race to snatch it before it sinks into the pool, where recovery becomes impossible. Every minute counts. Within hours, the brine's chemistry will preserve the body, sealing it off from further decay or consumption. The interface acts as both a filter and a trap. Particles and plankton drifting downward accumulate in a visible sheen, sometimes forming a faint, shimmering film on the brine's surface. Here, microbial communities break down what they can, recycling nutrients and releasing energy that supports the next layer of life. But the boundary is unforgiving. Anything that lingers too long risks immobilization. Some scavengers have adapted to this danger with remarkable strategies. Shrimp in the Red Sea, for example, have been observed darting in and out of the halocline, snatching food in brief, calculated bursts before retreating to safer water. This dance at the margin creates a food web unlike any found in the open ocean. Energy flows sideways, not downward, from the chemical gradients at the interface, through microbial mats to specialized grazers and swift predators. The entire ecosystem is compressed into a narrow band, each participant tuned to the timing and intensity of chemical fluxes. The result is a living portrait of adaptation, where survival depends on reading the invisible signals of the brine's edge and seizing opportunity in a place where hesitation can mean death. Remotely operated vehicles are designed to withstand the crushing pressure of the deep sea, but few environments test their limits like the edge of a brine pool. The moment a vehicle's thruster dips into the invisible boundary, everything changes. Buoyancy calculations, so reliable in ordinary seawater, become guesswork. The brine's density, more than 8 times that of the water above, can cause a sudden loss of lift. Motors strain as if dragging through syrup. On a 2017 Gulf of Mexico dive, drive motor logs from the ROV Hercules recorded a spike in load, nearly double the norm, when a side thruster brushed the brine. The telemetry flagged a warning, forcing the pilot to pull back. Had the vehicle pressed forward, the risk of immobilization was real. Tethers, the lifelines connecting remotely operated vehicles to surface ships, are especially vulnerable. In the dense brine, a tether can sink and coil on the pool's surface, sticking fast. Any attempt to free it risks pulling the vehicle itself into the trap. Dr. Eric Cordes, a deep-sea ecologist with hundreds of hours on the controls, describes the tension in those moments. He recalls hearing the whine of a thruster laboring as the vehicle's nose dipped toward a brine lake. The control room fell silent. Every movement had to be calculated, too much thrust, and the vehicle could break free only to snap a cable or lose a manipulator arm. Too little, and the vehicle might settle into the brine, where recovery is nearly impossible. Protocol now demands constant monitoring of motor loads and real-time adjustments to ballast. Pilots watch for the telltale shimmer of the brine's surface, knowing that a single misjudgment can cost millions in equipment. The hazard is not theoretical. Drive logs from multiple dives show abrupt load increases and erratic depth readings as vehicles approach the interface. Each spike is a data point and a warning. For Cordes and his team, the engineering stakes are as tangible as the science. The physics of brine pools do not forgive mistakes. They punish them with silence and loss. A checklist sits taped to the console. Ballast trim, acoustic beacon offset, sampler calibration, thruster diagnostics. Every pilot knows the procedure by heart, but at the edge of a brine pool, routine becomes ritual. The smallest oversight can turn a survey into a salvage operation. Acoustic beacons are set to transmit at staggered intervals, never overlapping, so that if a vehicle loses visual reference, it can still home in by sound. Pilots rehearse the offset coordinates, memorizing the pool rim as a no-go zone. The remotely operated vehicle's manipulator arms are fitted with modified bottles, lined with Teflon and double-gasketed to resist corrosion. Standard Niskin bottles, designed for open ocean, have failed here, springs seized by salt, seals eaten away in hours. Newer models are tested in mock-ups, filled with saturated brine before ever seeing the seafloor. A field engineer recalls the first time a sampler was lost to the pool. The bottle, meant to trip just above the interface, slipped a few centimeters too far. The brine's density pulled it down, and the tether went slack. No amount of tension would free it. Since then, every deployment is watched in silence, eyes on the load meters and depth readouts. Pilots keep a hand on the trim controls, ready to compensate for sudden buoyancy loss. The phrase "pit of despair" is not an exaggeration. In the logbook, one pilot writes, "It felt like the machine was being swallowed. We barely got the arm back." Sampling protocol now includes a hard stop. If the manipulator tip dips below the shimmer, all movement ceases. The team waits for the brine to settle, then retracts slowly, sometimes inch by inch. Any sample that returns contaminated, a trace of brine in the bottle or a crust of salt on the seal, is logged and discarded. On some dives, the remotely operated vehicle carries sacrificial samplers meant to test the edge and be abandoned if necessary. In the control van, the tension is palpable. Every checklist item is a line of defense against a silent, invisible hazard. The pilots speak in clipped sentences, voices low. "Hold position. Back 2%. Watch the beacon drift." The margin for error is measured in centimeters and seconds. For all the technology on board, survival at the brine's edge depends on discipline, memory, and respect for the chemistry that waits just below the shimmer. Beneath miles of ocean, brine pools remain almost entirely unmapped. Less than 0.05% of the deep sea has been explored. As climate change stirs ocean chemistry and methane seeps increase, these toxic lakes may shape the planet's future in ways we can barely predict. The boundaries between life and death shift in the dark, and what waits below may one day rise to the surface. What do you think we will find when we finally look deeper?